Bill O'Brien selects his players to attend ACC Media Days, and one omission may surprise you.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black, the editor of Eagle Insider. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for scoops, analysis, and daily news on your Boston College Eagles, you can't do better than Locked On Boston College, a 5-day-a-week podcast that's available free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, we're going to discuss the end of what was a promising June that ended up being a difficult June. The tough weekend that came to be for BC recruiting. Locked On's own Spencer McLaughlin comes up with his conference rankings, and I have some thoughts about where he has BC and some other teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And we're going to kick things off with a topic that usually doesn't get a lot of interest, but for Boston College, it has been a topic of interest for the last 2 weeks, and that's 2 years, and that's ACC Media Days. And the reason it has been a topic of discussion is because 2 straight years, once under Jeff Hafley, once under Bill O'Brien, BC has brought a quarterback down to ACC Media Days, and that said quarterback lasted not through the whole season, and not just because of injuries, but because they got pulled. So it was, 2 years ago, it was Emmett Moorhead. He was the quarterback in 2023, the presumptive starter. They sent him down to the ACC Media Days, and was it two drives into the first opening game, they yank him for Thomas Castellanos, and we never see Emmett Moorhead again. We saw him for a little bit in an injury mop-up duty, but really, he was not the starter ever again. Then you have last year, you have Castellanos doing that too. You have Castellanos going with BC's new staff down to the ACC Media Days. And what happens there? Castellanos was not even supposed to be the starter starting the year. That was supposed to be Grayson James, but he doesn't make the year and he ends up quitting. So Bill O'Brien has a choice. We all know what's going on with the quarterback quarterback battle that they have going on between Grayson James and Dylan Lonergan. We don't know who is going to be that starting quarterback yet. And right now, it would seem like a not really that great of a move if you brought Grayson James down and then Dylan Lonergan ends up winning the battle, and you're not bringing Dylan Lonergan. So I think what Bill O'Brien did, he chose 4 players. All of them, I think, are great choices. Wide receiver Lewis Bond, offensive lineman Logan Taylor, linebacker Davion Crouch, or Bam if you want to call him that, and KP Price, their safety. He stayed away from it. That's a great move, because if you are still in the throes of potentially looking at one, it could be one quarterback or another, don't put them out there. It's just a bad look. So I thought O'Brien did the right thing here. Media Days, I'm not a big fan of Media Days because it's a great networking opportunity, I'm sure. But living up in Boston, it's quite the expensive trip if I wanted to do that. And the content you get out of it isn't all that great. So I'm not always that interested in it because it's all like cookie cutter stuff, like stuff that you're going to get from any boring press conference. There's nothing really all that interesting unless you're going down there to meet some friends that a couple of my buddies that write for Louisville or Georgia Tech or something are down there and you want to say hi. That's a different story, but it's still important. And it's really the kickoff of the college football season. Big 12 just had theirs. SEC is next week, and then ACC is after that. And you're going to have Jim Phillips up there. That's usually the big piece, right? Jim Phillips talking about the state of the ACC. What have they done in the last year? What's the new initiatives that they're looking at? What is he doing to shrink that gap between the Big Ten, SEC, and then the ACC? He's going to have to talk a lot about that. That's the stuff right there. The players themselves, yeah, it's all about how hard they're working and the optimism they have going forward, which I don't blame them. That's what they're asking you. But to keep Grayson James out of this fray, probably a wise idea. Because I've said this a million times, and our everydayers know this. I truly believe, being at practice, that they don't have a decision yet, and that Bill O'Brien is telling the truth when he says, "I am waiting into the summer to make a decision who's starting." It could be any guy. It could be Lonergan, Dylan Lonergan, or Grayson James. So if you're in that spot, you just go with the other guys. I mean, you could have brought other players too. There's plenty of other upperclassmen. There's Owen Stodmeyer, defensive tackle. You have Jordan McDonald. There's other guys that are out there that may be well respected out there. If you brought Grayson James there, the questions he's going to get. How does it feel to be having another quarterback battling you for the starting job? What are you going to feel like if you don't win it? Like, just keep him cool for that, because he does not need to hear that right now. So that was great. And then, of course, there's one school that totally screwed this all up too, and that's Florida State. Now, if you've been following along, I have tried my best to not take this show into smash Tommy Castellanos nonstop. When he does something that deserves it, I definitely will bring it up. But for the most part, like, I know there was like TikTok videos. I saw the message board genius teasing him because it was cringy. But now Mike Norville, like, I guess you have to bring your quarterback if that's the case. But I feel like Tommy Castellanos needs a bit of a media break right now, because he seems like he's imploding. And that's probably the worst thing that could be happening, is that, like, he's letting all this stuff get out there and people are going to hate him and all that stuff. But he's coming. He's going to be at ACC Media Days, and he's not going to get. I promise you, he's going to get there, and they're not going to ask him anything that's going to be tough for him to answer. But my bigger issue with that is, if I was Mike Norville, it doesn't take a question for him to say something obnoxious, because he's just doing it nonstop now. So he's probably going to go out there and get the hated thing. So unless Florida State is going for that, I want to be a wrestling heel move here and let him be, the next hated quarterback in the annals of time that includes, Ryan Leaf or Cam Newton, even Tim Tebow, and all these other guys that people just don't like. Maybe that's what they're going for. I don't know. But I thought Bill O'Brien did the right thing. It's not really a big topic to talk about, but I think a lot of folks were just glad that if it is Grayson James, that they didn't put him out there, because it really does stink for those players. Like, I felt so bad for Emmett Moorhead a couple years ago. They made him the face of that team and then just benched him. So with the odds that maybe Dylan Lonergan could be the starter, you just don't do that. Just let the guy, practice and get himself ready, and we'll see where it goes from there. Now, in a moment, Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football made his own power rankings. I have my thoughts on these, because there's some big ticky things in there that I'm gonna get into, including where Boston College lands. I'll have some thoughts on all of that in just a moment. We've all been there together, logging in early and waiting for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot to a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Are you tired of endlessly scrolling or trying to find the best deals? Game Time's Zone Deals pick the best seats in your selection section just for you. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay, with no hidden fees. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Welcome back. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. And for all of our first listeners, you have been, I'm blown away with how many people have talked to me about being like, hey, AJ, the first thing I do every morning is listen to your podcast. It's great. It's great to have so many of you out there that really want to get your Boston College news. And I appreciate you trust me to be the one to get it to you. Now, if you're looking for a second podcast, Locked On College Football is one I've always talked about. And that's hosted by Spencer McLaughlin. Now, Locked On College Football, they look at everything. and he made power rankings for every conference, including the ACC. So I wanted to share with you Spencer McLaughlin's power rankings. I'm going to put them up on the screen and see how this actually ends up looking. Yep, didn't work with me. There we go. Get rid of me. Now you can hear me and you can see it too. So I look at this, and they have Boston College as number 12. And so I don't really hate that one. I think BC is probably on most power rankings around that area. It's just some of the other teams that are put around them that I feel like, okay, we need to take a chill pill here. First of all, let's look at where Syracuse is. Syracuse last year was a Kyle McCord show. He had some weapons around him, but it really was the Kyle McCord show. They really couldn't play much defense, and they could run a little bit with Lakeem Allen, but you had for Fran Brown's credit, got a great quarterback in there, and he threw for over 4,700 yards. He's gone. All their wide receivers are gone. Their running back is gone. They're depending on George Rooks to be one of their starting defensive tackles, and their defense probably isn't going to get any better. 7th, and this is before I even get into what Syracuse's out of their schedule looks like. They got 4 playoff teams. They have Tennessee, and then they have 3 others. What? Why is Syracuse 7? This is a team that is projected to finish dead last, maybe off in front of Stanford, and is reason for it. It's not because of anything. It's just they're playing a really, really tough schedule, and you're not trotting out Kyle McCord this time. You've got Steve Angeli or Ricky Collins, excuse me. Neither of these guys have done anything. So, I mean, when McCord came in, he played for Ohio State. It wasn't like he just didn't play. These guys have not played. So I'm very skeptical of Syracuse. Additionally, I'm really interested to see one I kind of disagree for being too low is UNC. UNC is at 15. They've got a quarterback. They got a kid from G5 that put up bonkers numbers. You got Bill Belichick, and maybe he's going to burn out quick at the college level, but I trust him more than some they're behind Virginia. Virginia's a dumpster fire. No offense, but they got Chandler Morris, which great for them, but they're not a good team. They haven't been a good team in a while. They beat BC last year, but that was because Tommy Castellanos basically imploded. I'm very skeptical of that one. So I would put UNC even higher. And hey, I've been bashing this school for weeks. I'm going to say another team I think he has too low. Florida State. Yes, I do. I don't like Tommy Castellanos in the way things went down, but I get the sense they're going to rebound. They're not 14th. And if they do, Mike Norville is gone. But I think they're going to be a better team than that. So those were some that went down. Another one that was 2 that went up. It should go up. Now another one that should go down is Cal. Cal's ahead of BC. Cal, who has a coach that's looking over his shoulder constantly at Ron Rivera, who could potentially try to steal his job. They lost everything between Jaden Ott, all their wide receivers, Fernando Mendoza. They brought in some players, but you don't have the spark that you had last year. I'm very skeptical of Cal. They've, what was it, 36 transfers out? This team got massacred in the transfer portal. So I think they should be much lower than where they're at. Stanford is right where they need to be because they're going to be pitiful and terrible. And BC has to beat them on the road, but Stanford doesn't have much left. They're running on fumes right now. So they're low. The top 2 I agree with, Clemson and Miami. I think Clemson's going to win the ACC, and Miami, I could keep them at number 2. I'm not a big Carson Beck fan, but they've done enough. I think they'll get there. But I also think they have SMU at 5 really low. Kevin Jennings is awesome. He's a really good quarterback, and credit to Brett Lashley. He's putting together a good program, and I think they're going to be higher and potentially a top 25 team. So there's my thoughts. I think as I said, BC at 12, you'd love to see them higher. I've seen some power rankings that have them as high as 8, but I understand. I do get it. I get like, okay, you've lost a lot and, you're going to have to overperform to get to that next level. But that is something that I think, Bill O'Brien can do. I think that's something that this team is able to do. So that was just my thoughts on his conference rankings. Now, if you have not checked out Spencer McLaughlin's show, if you're looking just for more college football content, he's great. He does a daily college football podcast. He has different guests on from around the Locked On Nation, and it's great. So he'll be doing lots of these different conference rankings, and you can hear his thoughts on the SEC and Big Ten and all that good stuff over on Locked On College Football. So definitely check that out. Now, in a moment, we're going to end this episode with some bad news, and that has to do with the recruiting world, as BC lost out on a number of big names, and I'll get into what that means in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am your host, AJ Black, and I want to thank again my first listeners and my everydayers. You are my special people because you listen every day, and you listen to me first every day, whether you're going to the gym, making a cup of coffee, sitting at your desk answering emails. You like to listen to Boston College news, and I'm glad you're here with me. And I also want to apologize. Last Friday, I was out. I had a medical surgery. It wasn't anything bad. It's something in my ear. So I was unable to record a 5th episode. So if there's any big news on a Saturday or something, you better believe I'm going to cover that too, to make sure you guys get your 5 shows. So let's get into tough weekends for recruiting, because this weekend really put a damper on what happened in the month of June for BC football and recruiting. 3 different Boston College targets announced over the weekend, and not a single one picked Boston College. Now, all of them, I kind of alluded to many of them throughout the weeks. None of these were unexpected. I mean, I've kind of tried to tell you guys that these 3 were not coming, but they were worth talking about, and you never knew where things could change. So let's go with the big one, the big fish, Carter Gooden. I've talked a lot about Carter Gooden, and BC was in his top 3 at the end. It came down to Penn State, UCLA, and Boston College, and he ended up picking UCLA. This was a really tough loss because, as I've said before, if you could land Carter Gooden, you'd change the face of your defense. You'd bring in a guy that played locally. He's not local at all. He's from Canada, but gave you the type of recruit you really could use on this defense, and you didn't get him. It's a loss. That's all you can say about it. And I don't know, the first thing I see everyone saying is it's money. Well, Carter Gooden has said multiple times that it isn't money, but everyone talks and says different things. So I don't know if I believe him on that one, but if that's what he's going to say, that's what he's going to say, right? So he picked there, and I'm guessing part of it was because his teammate, defensive lineman Marcus Almada, also from Tabor Academy, also committed on the same day to UCLA. So BC loses 2. Well, Almeida was not going to come to BC because BC never recruited him, but you lose Carter Gooden. So that one really stung. But I've had a crystal ball in for him to end up at UCLA for like a week before that because I'd heard buzz, and there was other reports going around that he was going to pick UCLA. So that one was a really rough one because I think it really would have changed the outcome of BC's recruiting class. It doesn't now because BC is at like 31 last I checked, and I know you guys keep mentioning it. It's going to probably go back, right? Because there's a lot of teams that still haven't stocked up on their classes yet. So that was tough. Second, the other name that I thought BC could have had a chance with, but he's quiet. The staff went quiet on him. Is Amir Clark out of Osceola, Florida. He was a defensive tackle. Now, I was curious if BC was even still recruiting him because they landed Gavin Neal a couple weeks ago, and he plays that defensive tackle, nose tackle position. But, I look at the finalists. It was Rutgers, Syracuse, and Georgia Tech. He ends up at Georgia Tech, which gives them 2 of BC's defensive tackles that they were going for. There was another kid earlier this cycle that BC was high on, and he came for an official visit, and then Alex Willis ended up at Georgia Tech too. So that was a second loss. And that one I don't want to say surprised me because it really didn't surprise me, but it was more like I just didn't know where things were, and no one was talking about it. So that one was there, and then the third one didn't surprise me at all. And again, if you go back through last week's episode, I told you he was going to go here. Jordan Best, cornerback that BC had on for an official visit as well. He chose NC State. He's from around that area. It seemed, that was the case, and that was what was going to happen, was that Best was going to pick the Tar Heels, not Tar Heels, excuse me, Wolfpack. God, NC State fans are going to get all of my mentions. He's a good player, but again, just like with Clark, I saw Gavin Neal commit. BC had 4 defensive backs committed. They can't take every cornerback that they want. So I'm guessing that they either knew about it or they had another guy that they thought was as good, and they went with Xavier Myers instead. So that's 3 losses right there. Now, where do things stand for Boston College? You look at the board, it's pretty blank. They're at 26 commitments. And they can keep going up if they want to, but my experience tells me, as I said before, and this, if you've listened, you've probably heard me say this before, that there's 2 things they're going to look at: senior film and flips. So senior film, that's a kid like Sterling Sanders from last year, where you watch his tape his senior year to see how much he's jumped and try to get in on that. That could be a kid just like Sterling Sanders and Jaden Fry. They were both committed to smaller schools, but they watched the film and got them to bump up. So those could be something that they could go for if there's a position they still want to get. And then there's flips. College football can go a million different ways. If a player's on a team and that team just starts to fall apart, or the coach is on the hot seat, those players may start to look again. And that's when you jump in and snab them. Excuse me. We saw that a little bit last year with Shaker Rising because Utah just basically processed him out for another quarterback. But I could see it happening for BC too. Like, they're going to be, there's many recruitments out there right now that they're not going to say that they're still in contact with because they're committed elsewhere, but they're in contact with them even though they're committed elsewhere. They're not going to say that though. So I think that could happen as well. But all in all, it was a tough weekend for recruiting. In June itself, there was a few weird, it was a weird month for official visits. You went in with a pretty solid core group that had already committed. I think they were at 14 commitments at that point. In years past, what was it, last year? They had like 2. So it's a different feel for that. But the first weekend, now that it's all over, BC went 0 for 12 on official visits. Like, guys that took an official visit, they ended up all of them ended up committing elsewhere. And I have no idea what that's all about. Could it be NIL? Sure. Is it the staff? They just weren't connecting with the staff. That could be it. I don't know. But that is something to watch for. Now, folks keep asking me too, how does this change? And the first thing is winning, right? You got to win. And we'll have to wait to see how the other factors come in. And maybe Father Jack Butler will be a godsend, literally, to help fix this program so that it does become more attractive for other recruits. So that's my thoughts there. It's just tough. And so we're now in a quiet part of July. We're heading into ACC Media Days, but recruiting's quieting down because it's a dead period. I think the staff is usually this is around the time of year the staff goes on vacation, so you're not even hearing much of that. Craig Fitzgerald is not, because if you go and watch any Instagram reel of any of the players, they're doing some crazy cardio work. And they're like running up hills and all sorts of stuff. As someone who is not running anymore, it's exhausting watching, but it's cool because they all look like they're getting in great shape. So just wanted to say that the rest of the staff, I believe, is probably on vacation right now. So it's pretty quiet. So we'll be back tomorrow for another episode. Thank you all for listening. Follow me along with me on Twitter at AJBlack247. I'm also available on Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, Instagram. Just either look up Eagle Insider, Locked On BC, and of course on TikTok. I've been doing clips, and when news starts to break, I'll be doing more video clips too. That are just not like cuts from this. I've done a few. If you go onto my TikTok, you can find them that are like more breaking news type of things. So if you like that kind of stuff, go check out my TikTok. It's Locked On Boston College, and I will see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.